Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into one of the most absolutely profound works on human psychology ever published. We're going to unpack Daniel Kahneman's Nobel Prize-winning insights into the two completely different ways our brains actually process the world around us. Seriously, if you've ever wondered why you make the choices you do, or why you sometimes act, well, totally irrationally, you are in the exact right place. We're going to decode the biological glitches in our decision-making. Now, before we jump right into the inner workings of the mind, it's pretty incredible to trace the global journey that actually led to these discoveries. Daniel Kahneman was born in Israel, raised in France, and after getting his bachelor's in psychology, he moved over to America to get his PhD. This groundbreaking work eventually culminated in a Nobel Prize, specifically for his revolutionary integration of psychology and economics. I mean, he literally changed how we understand human behavior. So here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll be covering 1. Meet your systems, 2. Biases and shortcuts, 3. The illusion of understanding, 4. Risk and loss aversion, and finally, 5. The two selves.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, Meet Your Systems, Two Ways of Thinking.
So it turns out we have two very different operators running the show up there. On one side, we've got System 1. This guy is fast, highly emotional, automatic, and completely effortless. Honestly, you don't even realize it's running most of the time. But on the other side, we have System 2. This is your slow, deeply logical, conscious thinker. It requires a ton of concentration to use, and because of that, it's inherently kind of lazy. It much prefers to just sit back and let System 1 do all the heavy lifting whenever possible. Okay, let's actually test this in real time. Take a look at the prompt we've got here, and just pay attention to what happens in your head. What comes to mind when you hear bread and... You don't even have to consciously try to answer this. Butter, right? The moment you saw those words, the answer just magically sprang into your consciousness. That immediate, uncontrollable leap to butter, or, instantly knowing that 2 plus 2 equals 4. That is your automatic System 1, taking over without breaking a sweat. It relies on these deeply ingrained patterns to fire off rapid responses without even asking your permission. So the really crucial point here is that your logical System 2 only steps in when things get complicated. If System 1 runs into a problem it just can't automatically solve, it calls on System 2 for backup. System 2 is the one handling complex calculations, evaluating difficult choices, and most importantly, it modifies or completely suppresses the wild impulses of System 1. But remember, System 2 demands intense concentration, which means it tires out super quickly. When System 2 gets exhausted, System 1 grabs the wheel again. It's exactly why you're way more likely to make an impulsive decision or snap at someone after a long, draining day at work.
Moving right along to part 2, biases and shortcuts, flaws in fast thinking.
Now, the inherent danger in all this fast thinking is that System 1 literally cannot experience doubt. It's completely blind to uncertainty. It just jumps to a conclusion using whatever limited evidence happens to be directly in front of it at that exact second. We absolutely rely on System 2 to wake up, feel doubt, and look at alternative options. But if System 2 is distracted or just being its usual lazy self, we end up accepting System 1's rapid-fire conclusions as absolute facts.
And one of the most common ways this jumping to conclusions totally hurts us is through the anchoring effect. This happens when you're trying to estimate some unknown value, like, say, negotiating the price of a new car. Your lazy brain relies way too heavily on the very first random number it hears to make a final judgment. Because System 2 really doesn't want to do the hard work of calculating a real answer from scratch, it just takes System 1's random starting point and barely adjusts it. It's crazy. Let's head into part 3, the illusion of understanding, the danger of hindsight. The truth is, our brains deeply despise uncertainty. We crave a predictable world. So we end up suffering from what's called hindsight bias. This is that false, retrospective belief that we clearly understand past events. The second something happens, we immediately invent a logical story about why it was completely inevitable. And the trap here is, by tricking ourselves into thinking the past was predictable, we falsely believe we have the magical power to predict future outcomes. Because of this hindsight bias, we are incredibly harsh on professionals who have to make the really tough calls. I'm talking about doctors, financial advisors, social workers, politicians. When a bad outcome happens, we look backward with our manufactured clarity and unfairly blame them. We literally tell ourselves, oh, they absolutely should have seen that coming, even when the outcome was totally unpredictable at the time they actually made the decision.
were judging the quality of their decision purely on the outcome rather than the actual facts they had at the moment.
Which brings us to part 4. Risk and loss aversion are irrational choices.
You'll see here that our logic when facing risk is just incredibly flawed. When we're faced with a scenario where we can gain something, we desperately cling to security. We will almost always choose a guaranteed, smaller win over taking a totally reasonable risk for a larger one. But if you flip the script to a loss scenario, suddenly we take massive, dangerous, totally irrational risks just to hold on to the tiny hope of avoiding a sure, painful defeat. We just hate losing that much. This entire behavior is driven by loss aversion. As you can see, our motivation to avoid losing just completely towers over our motivation to gain. The biological pain we feel from losing money, like seeing a big dip in your retirement portfolio, is vastly more powerful than the joy we feel from winning that exact same amount. This disproportionate fear completely warps how we set our life goals. It often causes us to actually lower our expectations just so we don't have to face the pain of failure. So, what ties all of this risk aversion together? Regret. Regret is not just a passing feeling, you guys. It is a powerful, active force. The paralyzing fear of future regret motivates us to avoid making choices altogether. Decision makers often just stick to the default option, completely missing out on incredible opportunities simply because the safety of doing nothing feels like a shield against the crushing weight of potential regret.
Finally, let's move to part 5. The two selves, experience versus remember.
Okay, this is absolutely fascinating. You actually have two selves. Your experiencing self lives strictly in the present moment. It feels the moment-to-moment pain and joy. But your remembering self is entirely different. The remembering self ignores how long an event lasted and judges the entire past based almost exclusively on two snapshots, the peak intensity of the experience and how it ended. And here's the real kicker. Your remembering self is the one making all your future decisions, based entirely on those incredibly flawed snapshots. Let's break down just how flawed our memory really is. Our short-term memory is so limited that we can differently remember an event that happened just 15 minutes ago. We completely ignore duration. Because of this, a terrible ending to a movie or a painful breakup at the end of a long relationship will make your remembering self label the entire experience as horrible. It totally erases the months or years of genuine positive emotions your experiencing self actually felt. Basically, your future choices are being held hostage by these distorted memories. We've seen how System 1 jumps to conclusions, how we suffer from hindsight bias, how terrified we are of loss, and how our own memories lie to us. So as we wrap up today's explainer, I want you to ask yourself this one provocative question as you navigate your career, your relationships, and your finances. Is your logical System 2 truly in the driver's seat, or is your automatic, emotional System 1 secretly making all your decisions for you? Take a second to really think about that. Thanks so much for joining me.